Sara Codair is a community college writing teacher and author of speculative stories. They partially owe their success to their faithful feline writing partner, Goose, the Meowditor. You can follow Sara and Goose's writing journey on Twitter and Instagram at Shattered Smooth and on TikTok at @SCodairWrites. And I'll put that in the chat. Take it away, Sara.
All right, so as you see, I'm reading from Distant Gardens, which is a collection of short stories. The one I'm reading for Bree and the Marsh Kraken is set in the near future on Cape Cod. Salt marsh was Bree's favorite smell. There was something about the sweet, salty scent of decay and rebirth that made her feel at home. Home. Hope. The warm sensation in her chest blocking out cold drafts of despair from a world that was too damn hot. Sweating from a long ride, Bree got off her bike. She needed a break, a moment to compose herself before the last half mile to her childhood home. She leaned her bike against a pitch pine's rough trunk, kicked off her shoes, and tiptoed past the bushes at the edge of the crumbling asphalt causeway, admiring the expanse of green blades poking up through dark brown muck and last year's decaying yellow grass. Her toes curled into the mud, rooting her to the ground until she felt like she was part of the land, like she belonged as much as a tree. There were people further out, on the far side of the marsh. Researchers, probably. Not that they'd save it from climate change. The marsh, like the rest of this godforsaken planet, was dying. Still, there was a silver lining. Rising sea levels and frequent hurricanes had driven Cape Cod property values down to something Bree could actually afford. And the land upon which her childhood home once stood was for sale. She was going to buy it back. She was meeting the realtor in 15 minutes. She needed to smile. She needed to get back on her bike, cross the causeway onto Monomoskoy Island, and take the first right down her old driveway. She needed to go the rest of the way home. But her feet wouldn't budge. What if it didn't work out? What if she got there only to find out it had already sold? She shook her head. No one wanted to live here anymore. People were selling lots for a fraction of what they paid 20 years ago. Plus, the realtor wouldn't let her drive all the way here for nothing, right? She took another deep breath and stepped away from the marsh, back to the road. A deep burbling made her pause. What is that? She glanced over her shoulder. On the far edge of the water, where marsh met saltwater pond, a ring of ripples disturbed the still water. A deep groan rose from the earth. Not good. The ground trembled beneath her feet. Before she could properly react, Bree toppled over, twisting as she fell so as not to damage the delicate mat of greenswing at her feet. The edge of the marsh met asphalt, and asphalt met Bree's knees, drawing blood. The ground twisted. Jagged cracks, born of last winter's excessive cycle of freezing and thawing, widened into fissures. Earthquake? They happened in the Northeast, but rarely. Never this bad. A deep rumbling groan warred with a loud ringing in her ears. Why did this have to happen today? The crack rang through the air as the utility pole came down on the causeway. Bree scrambled back towards the marsh. Grass bent and scraped her hands. Mud squirted between her toes and splattered her legs. She kept scrambling forward until she tumbled into a pool of water, crushing sharp blades of marsh grass with flailing arms. A slurping belch came out from the marsh. Someone screamed. The researchers? Yes. They were running towards her as brown tentacles whipped out of the muck and flailed at them. Tentacles? Attacking people? In the marsh? In her marsh? Impossible. I need to get out of here, Bree muttered, touching her head to feel for a bumper scrape. She didn't remember hitting it, but she might not if she had a concussion. Another scream. Tentacles wrapped around a man's ankle. He fell. Fear stung Bree like a jellyfish. A shot of adrenaline. She scrambled to her feet and lurched forward to help, only to slip on something slimy and faceplant in the water. The marsh, it seemed, did not want her to go. Tentacles slithered back into the marsh. She blinked, and they were gone. So were the people. The water stilled. A breeze rustled tall grasses. Birdsong returned. She stood, finally, her clothes soaked, the air touched chiller than before. Nothing in the marsh should have tentacles like that, right? Could it have been what? A discarded pet snake? An oversized eel? And the people? Where had they gone? Did they have a boat? Bree hadn't noticed and rowed away. Maybe terrified of the giant pet snake? Yeah, that seemed reasonable. Bree got on her bike and rode. Past the tangle of poison ivy and scattered lady slippers was a driveway, torn up and wider than she remembered. Sand and shells crunched under her tires. The dip on the left was still there. It had snagged her bike tire when she was 10. The fall would have been softer had it been sand like when Bree was a kid and not speckled with the remains of crushed shells by the new owners. She landed on her knees. Again, one of those shells sliced her palms deeper and deepened the cut she already had. Sand clung to her soaked clothes. Sweet pine, salt, and dust mingled in her nose. She lingered on the ground, digging her fingers into the dirt, breathing in the scent of home, of childhood, of freedom, a place where she belonged. Bree, are you all right? The voice was familiar, though she hadn't heard it in years. It belonged here. It was the realtor she talked to on the phone. It wasn't the realtor she talked to on the phone, but someone 1,000 times better. She'd last heard it when? 12, 13 years ago? Definitely during Tilly Blake's slumber party when they'd been telling stories near the fireplace of haunted marshes and ghostly apparitions and tentacles? Was she remembering that right? Yes, no. Bree pushed like curls out of her face. Did you feel that earthquake? Yeah, that's the worst one I felt since I moved back east. Gretchen Morrison, Bree's old neighbor, stared down at her, wearing the same half-smothered smirk Bree remembered from childhood. Her short brown hair shone in the sun, sweat beaded on her forehead from humid air. She picked at chapped lips, or tried to anyways. Her nails were too short to pick at anything. She'd always kept them that way. You're all scraped up. Did the quake knock you off your bike? Not exactly. You look different. I've never seen you in anything other than jeans. Gretchen's hands flew to her side, smoothing a perfectly pressed short-sleeved white button-up with purple octopus print. Her khaki shorts were also wrinkle-free. A carabiner lined with keys hung from her belt loop. Her legs were unshaved. Bree remembered Gretchen had strong opinions about shaving as a teenager, and her feet were bare. Classic Gretchen, aside from the stiff glows. Gretchen crouched down in front of her and offered a sun-kissed hand. I grew up. And you're pretty banged up. Here, let me help. They fit together perfectly. They always had. Memories stirred up emotions too long buried. Bree thought she'd left Gretchen here in the marsh, buried under the mat in the salt water with her old home. And now, here they were, memories in her childhood home and Gretchen, tingling across her skin from the feather touch of Gretchen's fingertips, assaulting her senses as the salt and the humidity and Gretchen's floral perfume collided and surrounded Bree. And I will leave off there. If you want to read more about Gretchen and the marsh, saving the marsh and tentacles, check out Bree and the Marsh Kraken and Distant Gardens.